man?
Hey, Asher. Shalom Aleichem. How are you?
The point of these dialogues is for people to learn. I think people learn a lot better by hearing a dialogue than a monologue. I mean, all these rabbis online, Absolutely. They come up with the silliest ideas because no one challenges them. So, like, iron sharpens iron, like Mishlei. That's what I tried to achieve in these talks. All right, cool. So, in our earlier talk, you said that you agree with a lot of what I teach, but there are a handful of things that you don't agree with.
Yeah.
Do you want to mention them?
Sure. There are two main points.
I'm sorry. Can you introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, where you're from?
Oh, sure. My name is Mark Bent. I live in Brooklyn at the moment. I teach in my free time. I teach Torah to a small group of interested students, mostly Maimonidean-based things, a little bit of Tanakh. And I was ordained many, many years ago by Israel's rabbinate. Served as a professional rabbi for a year or two until I got deeper and deeper into Maimonidean philosophy and decided that receiving money for teaching Torah is a path that I want to abandon. And abandoned that path. I try to continue teaching as much as I can in my free time. It's been a challenge because, Parnassah takes a lot of our time, but...
Can you explain what is a Maimonidean?
Okay, that's great because that actually ties into both what I appreciate about the work you've done and my, if I may, I wouldn't say disagreement, but my disappointment in what I see as a missed opportunity on your part. Okay? Mm-hmm. So, to me, the core of Maimonidean philosophy and what Maimonides really, really cared about, what seemed to be a thread going through his entire worldview, is his unique conception of monotheism. And by that I mean his idea of Yichud Hashem, of one God, is kind of to be encapsulated in the Talmudic phrase of Kol HaKofer ba'avodah zarah ki'ilu kiyam et kol haTorah kula. He who rejects idolatry as if he kept the whole Torah, and someone who is modern avodah zarah, someone kind of accepts idolatrous ideas or practices, he might as well have thrown out the whole Torah. So monotheism means rejecting superstition, rejecting idolatry. It's actually kind of close to atheism, closer to atheism than to many theists, because to theists who have these inclusive views of different conceptions of God, and they see divinity in everything, and they'll tell you that every Jew is a chelek elaham and ma'al mamash, is a piece of God. They are rejecting the original Hebrew monotheist principles. And to that was something very important to Maimonides. And feel free to interrupt me, by the way. But
I wanted to add quick that this group is also called Rambamist, for those who know it by that name. Now, I'm not a Rambamist. I may have brought many to the movement just because I've spoken about it. There's a lot of things that I didn't invent that I just made popular because of YouTube that clearly predated me. Mm-hmm. But go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't like the term Rambamist, and we'll get to that in a minute, but because I'm not talking yet about legal and halachic practices as Rambam taught. I'm talking about the core ideology of what it means to be a Jew, what it means to believe in God. So if you claim to believe in the God of Israel, okay, and you accept that superstitious practice, you believe there's intermediaries out there who you can affect to get God's grace, in Maimonides' view, that's anti-biblical / rabbinic Judaism. Mm-hmm. And that's something, to me, that's one of the most important things that needs to be brought back into Judaism, because it appears that we've veered from that path. And I used to see you as a great ally in this. But then I feel from listening to your podcast that you've softened up on that. And you're well, there's
I did.
You were speaking about this.
Just let me slightly respond here before you go further, because you've mentioned a lot of things here. Now, many people consider me a Rambamist. I'm not a Rambamist, although I admire the Rambam the most. However, the more you study the Rambam, specifically Mishneh Torah and Moreh Nevuchim, you realize that a lot of that is not actual halakha. It's the Rambam's opinion. Although it's an opinion that I embrace, I always constantly try to educate my audience between what's halakha and what's ultimately agadah, or just good advice. Again, I embrace the Rambam's understanding of what he considers limitations of God, and I attack these ideas like Tzimtzum constantly. However, I'm not going to deny that it's just the Rambam's opinion, and you know what? The Rambam does make mistakes.
Yeah, so I definitely accept that Rabbeinu makes mistakes like all humans, and that's another part of my Maimonidean philosophy, is that humans are always going to be human, and we don't have infallible beings that can never be questioned. However, and we're not getting into the legal aspects, because that's like another part. I don't know if we'll get to that in this conversation, but we can maybe talk about that at another time, because it's kind of important, but it's like a different tangent. I think the core of it is to understand what it means to be a believing Jew. So, I can't sit quietly in a knesset, in a shul, where a rabbi is lecturing things that go against core monotheistic principles, like this Kabbalistic heresy. The Zohar, to me, will never just be an additional midrash that may or may not have been written by Shimon Bar Yochai. My issue with the Zohar is not an academic one that we can prove that it was written in the Middle Ages by a group of Kabbalists. That doesn't bother me. What bothers me is the content. The content is telling us that we can do actions in this world beyond Torah, just mystical action that can create an Esarusa Dilatata, a lower awakening that can have an effect on the higher world, Esarusa Dilaela, they call it, and I'm using the Ashkenaz pronunciation because whatever, but that's what they believe. They believe we can do things in this world to affect the upper worlds that will change our lives. Now, to me, that's the ancient idolatry that Avraham Avinu fought against. That is what Judaism came to get away from. And I feel that it's my job and all of our jobs to fight that intrusion of the ancient pagan world into the world of the prophets, of the monotheists. That's basically my position. And I kind of saw you as an ally in that. And then I feel like the last couple of years, from what I've read, listened to your podcast or, YouTube videos, you kind of soften that approach and say, well, Rambam isn't the only opinion, and others don't disagree, and, you can still believe in the Zohar and so on. And I feel that is yes.
I've become a politician.
Yeah.
It's really a tactic. I'll tell you.
I think you believe in it.
I do believe that there are certain things that are just the Rambam's opinion and not necessarily binding, although it's great advice. But I think, at least as a tactic...
but don't talk about law. We're talking about what it means to believe in God. We'll talk about law later. But what it means to believe in God. This is not just Rambam's opinion.
Hashkafa.
Yeah.
And it's our personal outlook as Jews. Absolutely. Well, just on the Rambam's principles alone, I would say probably 40% of Chazal would not have a share in the world to come according to the Rambam. They were corporealists. Rashi and Tosos had kind of a weird understanding of God about him actually having a body. Not Basar Adam, but a shape and a form. Things that the Rambam himself said that if you would embrace, you would lose your Halak and Olam Haba, and then steps in the right of it and says, who do you think you are?
Correct.
Making the statement when there were rabbis bigger than you who believed that God had a shape and a body. So Judaism has never been monolithic on that idea, but I embrace the teachings of the Rambam. But still, I acknowledge that it's just opinion. Regarding taking a lighter approach to the Zohar, it's really a tactic. The Zohar is really a collection of midrashim. And mind you, there are many other midrashim, not just in Midrash Rabbah, but in the Agadot that appear in Shas that sound almost as ridiculous. Instead of creating a whole campaign against these midrashim, just educate the Jewish community between Agadot and Halakha. Agadot are ultimately disposable. They're opinionated. In the vast majority of cases, they contradict each other and are not ultimately important in the vast majority of cases. If you teach it like that, you never have to create a witch hunt against the Zohar because you've educated your students to think halachically. In other words, create a hierarchy of what's actually binding, what's Torah Shebiktav, and what's actual Torah Shebal Peh, which is what I think is the biggest disconnect in the Jewish world today. The rabbis are too lazy to explain the difference between minhagim, Torah Shebektav, Torah Shebal-Peh, Niagadot, and they'll say everything was given in Har Sinai, including what my Rebbe taught me. Why? Because it ensures that they maintain power by keeping their congregants stupid.
I agree with you with all of that, but I agree with that. That's the, that rabbis are trying to maintain power, as you just mentioned, and the fact that if we taught people, and one of the biggest problems in what we call the Orthodox world is this lack of differentiation between Aggadic, non-legal material in the Talmud and legal material. However, the Zohar itself makes the claim that not only is it the most important part of the entire Torah, but it's the soul of Torah Shebechtav and Torah Shebal-Peh. And that reading and understanding and reading and not understanding the Zohar is higher than any other learning itself. Now, people read this, including myself.
The Arizal makes the same claims. Likutei Moharan makes the same claims. Yeah. The Tanya makes the same claims.
My problem is this. This is, I'm not going to interrupt you, but my issue is that if you look historically at the Jewish people, where we've come to, so our conception of religion has been invaded by the Kabbalists, when at the beginning, the, Talmudists and Maimonides, they call themselves even Maimonideans back then, tried to reject it. And the result of that is that if you look at the observant world today, and I say this as an observant Jew, and I don't say this happily, we're attracting the dumbest element among the Jewish people, and the most intelligent are leading us. The highest level Jews don't want to have anything to do with Judaism because of how ridiculous it appears. So this is not a time, if we want to save our people, our civilization, from being dumbed down into oblivion. We may have great numbers, but we'll have great numbers of fools. Doesn't help anyone. If we want to prevent that from happening, we have to root out the heresy of the Kabbalists and create an alternative community, or now it's Facebook and with social media, it's easier to do. We need to do that. If we don't do that, there may not be a civilization left for our grandchildren.
You're singing to the choir here. I agree with you, but I think it's a better tactic to work within evolution instead of revolution. In the beginning, the one thing that made me admirable to Dor Daim and Rio Rambamis was that I was willing to just call things like they were. But you know what? I just got me kicked out of synagogues. I had my own synagogue for 2.5 years in North Miami Beach. Everyone in the community said it was a mosque. Of course, because we followed actual halakha. I haven't changed my philosophy. I've just changed my approach. And not just with the Rambam's ideology that appears in the guide, also to his approach regarding Christianity. And this is something that I very adamantly disagree with the Rambam on, including his opinion on Islam, which I do consider idolatry. I don't know if you wanted to discuss.
I'll discuss it with you because we disagree on that, and it's fun to find things that good friends disagree on. If you sat and spoke about things we agreed on, it would be boring. I disagree with calling Islam idolatry. Unless you're talking about specific sects of Sufi Islam, which are very similar to the Kabbalists, and obviously they're idolaters. But if you're talking about like the regular Sunnis and most of the Shias, I can't find anything idolatrous about their doctrine as far as I know.
Rabbi Bar Chaim actually came out with a video around a year after mine also calling Islam idolatry, when everyone was bashing me when I came out with the idea. And mind you, it's not my idea. The Rambam was really a dat yachid on this whole issue, because the vast majority of rabbis in his time also believed it was idolatry. The Rambam was a dat yachid on many ideas, but the Rambam's the Rambam. Fine, and I admire the Rambam.
Okay, ultimately, whether we consider Muslims idolaters or not isn't going to change that much. The emergency, the way I see it, there's two emergencies, but the main one, in my opinion, is that we as a group need to reject the dangerous developments within Judaism in a completely explicit way. It can't be part of. We can't have the Zohar as a legitimate midrash, because if it's a legitimate midrash, then all this sophistry and Neoplatonic, all these ideas of just changing the gods, affecting the gods through our incantations and through our actions. If we don't get
You're singing to the choir here, man. We're kindred spirits on this, 100%. You know who you should be speaking to? People like Michael Baron and Rabbi David Brachlin, who have not made one video saying the things that you've been telling me tonight and I've been saying for the last 15 years.
The demographic. They don't. Yeah.
I know they don't believe in it, but they won't speak it. In other words, they won't preach what they practice. Understand, I don't live in Israel anymore, and the demographics is a little different over there. I mean, they'll burn your house down probably, like if you come out publicly as a Dordai, which is why, like, most of the Dordaim actually are hilltop settlers, who get their caravans demolished every month anyways. However, they're really misleading their audience. I've spoken to students of Michael Baron, and some of them actually believe that he admires the Zohar just because he's not public enough about it. The same goes with the students of Rabbi David Bachim.
Let me ask you a question. Did Rabbi Chaim not put out a video attacking the Zohar at some point? I think he did.
No.
He did. You sure? Because I remember, I may have not listened to the whole thing because I can't listen. I admire his content, but it would be easier for me to read read it and listen.
He's boring. He's boring to listen to. Okay.
But really, his content is amazing. But okay, maybe I'm wrong. I thought I heard him speak the truth about the Zohar. But then again, he's a big fan of Rav Kook. I used to be a fan of Rav Kook myself. And people who are involved in that have a hard time rejecting the Zohar.
Rav Kook put Dordaim in Cherem ultimately.
He was part of he signed his name to the Jerusalem rabbinate who agreed to the last true monotheist. Anyway, so it appears that we agree, but we maybe have a disagreement on tactics, so that kind of makes me happier that we don't have that great disagreement, but, less to argue about. But, I don't know if you want to take this to the other part of Maimonidean thinking, which is how the law works and halakha.
I'm not a Rambam, that's the thing. Yeah, but this isn't Maimonidean thinking. This is Divrei Sofrim. To go back to the Rasag about how halakha works, how it's ultimately the Beis Din Gadol, actual smicha. These concepts are not taught anywhere today. Just because there's a big dumbification going on in the Jewish world.
I think it's kind of like part of it is designed, and part of it is just stupidity of the teachers, the rabbis.
Right.
Anyway. Let me ask you a question. How would you define halakha? How does Jewish law work? What's your definition of Jewish law?
I think it's easier for me to just define Judaism. Judaism is just Torah Shebiktav and the rulings of the Sanhedrin. And the last Sanhedrin stood in around 300 of the Common Era, and then was dismantled, meaning that actual smicha couldn't have been given outside of Eretz Yisrael. But it gets a lot deeper than that, but I don't want to get too confusing.
So I kind of agree I could loosely agree with the statement you just made, and therefore I think that, yes, I agree with you that halakha is being taught as some conglomeration of opinions ranging, there's no real difference in the yeshiva that I went to, and I went to many great yeshivot. There's no real difference. This is the opinion of Rambam, this is the opinion of Moshe Feinstein, this is the opinion of Rashi, and then that's the opinion of Rabbi Chia. There's no real difference. They're just all opinions, and they all somehow converge into one big Torah Sheba'al Peh thing. They don't see it as decisions of the Supreme Court. And this is why if an Orthodox Jew asks a rabbi a question of halakha, the answer will be so convoluted and so difficult to understand because there's no real structure to it that you can spend your whole life asking questions and never really getting a clear answer or a clear reason for the answer you're given. Whereas if people were to approach halakha as Maimonides in the introduction to Mishneh Torah laid out, then halakha is the decisions of the Supreme Court, done, and we don't have the right to create new laws until we convene such a court, which we could do if we had the will and wisdom to do so, but unfortunately we don't. So
I disagree with that, by the way. He clearly says, it seems to me that this is how you reestablish smicha. Chazal never spoke about it anywhere, so it's just the Rambam's opinion. I'm pretty sure the Rambam never thought that in 1538 of the Common Era in Sfat, the Maori Beirav would take him at his word and try to reestablish smicha, which is,
I don't have a problem with the concept of reestablishing smicha. Smicha is basically a ceremony that we've created in the past, through Moshe Rabbeinu and others to kind of give... Yeah,
but it's non-halachic, that's the thing. Smicha was established by HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. He says, I'm going to put on the elders what I put on you. And that's what he put on Yehoshua, and on and on. I don't think that smicha...
That smicha is not going to come back, but we can have...
that's the only smicha...
That means anything, yeah? That's why I don't
right,
use
absolutely.
rabbi anymore. Even though it was ordained say I refuse to use the term. I don't like it.
But I have two smichas, and people question that I'm a rabbi just because I teach things that are not popular. It's fine. I mean, I tell people to respect me for my ideas.
Look,
yeah, but anyways, we don't need another court. We don't need new laws. We just have to keep the ones on the books. That's the thing. I work a lot with converts, and then people are saying, oh, we'll need another Sanhedrin to set these rabbis straight because they're mistreating converts. And I just tell them that if they just kept the laws on the book, there would be no mistreatment of converts. Because according to the halakha, conversion takes 1 day, and even the Rambam makes it clear in the Surabia, that from the outset we draw a person forth with kind words, and we don't overburden them with too many of the mitzvot, lest he turn away to the bad path and not remain on the right path, which is conversion.
That's only, but this is only, let's not skip the fact, this is only after we kind of, one, dissuaded them a bit, and two, made sure that they really, that it's in their best interest, and in our best interest. To
really stick to a Surabia there, and it's pretty much quoted in your idea by the Shulchan Aruch in Yevamos, in the Gemara, there it says that when they come, and you ask them, why do you want to convert this and that, you explain some of the mitzvot, and then it says you explain it a second time when he's already in the water. So now, that's not a 1 year or 6 month conversion process. Now, mind you, what that is the algorithm that Hillel established in Shas, right? When someone came to convert, it didn't say that Hillel spent a year learning with him. There are 3 instances. A guy comes on 3 false notions to convert. Right? Convert me that you make me the Kohen Gadol, convert me with that I don't accept Torah Shabbat Peir, convert me to what I learned Torah standing on 1 foot. On all those instances, Hillel converts him, it says miyad right away, and then he learns Torah with him. In other words, what they do nowadays is completely non-halachic. And I have a whole video bringing down all 3 sources. Go ahead.
I agree that what they do today is non-halachic. I don't disagree that the original conversion process is much more streamlined than it's being made out today. However, 2 points before we segue into conversion, which is another issue that we kind of disagree on. Look, the reason we need a Bedin HaGadol is not because of conversion. The reason we need a Bedin HaGadol is not for this particular issue. We need it because any legal system cannot stay ossified forever in one situation. So we both agree that the law is what the Sanhedrin, you call it Sanhedrin, or I call it Bedin HaGadol, what the Supreme Court ruled. So, if we were stuck today if the laws of the United States were stuck in 1950, we wouldn't be happy. Why should Jewish law be any different? Why from the year 100 to the year 300 it can develop, but at the year 300 of the Common Era, it can't develop anymore because the Supreme Court has been disbanded. So we're paying a heavy price by sometimes maybe doing weird things that are Bedin HaGadol can cancel or can change. And we also pay a heavy price because we kind of make developments in the law that are not really legitimate. All right? So there's many examples of that, but, conversion may or may not be one of them. But every group of human beings needs a legal system that's adaptable. And that was the greatness of the Torah Shabbat Peir. And we lost, and Torah Shabbat Peir is great and awesome and beautiful today, but how much more beautiful would it be if the intellectual elite of the Jewish people were to convene and to pass laws and adapt them for changing circumstances? It would be amazing, I think. But let me respond to this because we refuse to convene.
If there would be another Beit Din HaGadol, who do you think would be on it? I mean, it would pretty much resemble the Sanhedrin we have nowadays in Yerushalayim, which last I heard, the Nazi was Lubavitcher Chassid, which is why I'm not so enthusiastic of the temple being built either, because who's going to run it? Satmar? Breslov? I mean, honestly, I don't think that we need all these institutions in place to make things better. We just have to go back and keep the actual halakha. And mind you, there are some halachot that disgust me. Even straight in Mishneh Torah.
No, okay, same here.
Yeah, but even Chazal.
But the halachot are weak today. Don't feel comfortable with. Yeah? No, but let me respond with the following to your previous point. Okay, you're making a good argument that institutions don't a society necessarily make. If you had institutions of the Bedin HaGadol, it was run by a Lubavitcher, and it was populated with Hasidim and Kabbalists and all sorts of idolaters and who knows who else, then what kind of Sanhedrin would that be? If we had a Beit HaMikdash that was run by Satmar, what would that look like? Okay, but here's where your argument is wrong. these people, in their ideology, they would never build Bet HaMikdash. Because to them, the Bet HaMikdash is not a law that we have to bring certain sacrifices at certain times in central place of worship. For them, Bet HaMikdash is a fiery, magic, Harry Potter style thing that comes down from Shamayim as a reward for good behavior. So these people will never build it.
That's not part of the Hiluli theology. I mean, you're thinking of Rashi and Ultra Haredim.
I don't care about the...
So religious Zionists embraces Zohar and also want to destroy the Dome of the Rock and build a temple. You're talking about the extreme out there.
Yeah, so some people have idolatrous ideas and they should be, and everybody's scared to mention and everybody's scared to fight it, but I believe that it's our job to fight those ideas. If the Sanhedrin in the time of the Hasmoneans approved of the Sanhedrin, like apparently they, in Sefer Maccabim, they approved of a statue of Zeus in Bet HaMikdash because they thought that represents monotheism. But that doesn't mean that it becomes a law, and that doesn't mean that the institution of a Bedin HaGadol needs to be abolished, okay? So I think that the fact that institutions could be abused and often are abused, I think a Bedin HaGadol, you study just even the basic Hilchot Sanhedrin and how they work, it's kind of immune to abuse if it's done correctly, because it has to be an open session, it has to be a debate, argument. If you shut down the argument and there's, pressure groups, then the Bedin is invalid, right? Like if the Al Bedin votes first, then the vote is invalid. He votes last. They can't have pressures on different people. So let's say we're having...
Let me explain how I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you that if people actually started keeping halakha and understanding halakha correctly, then it would be nice to try to reestablish the Sanhedrin. But the way it looks today, with 99.5% of religious Jewry, they're lost. I wouldn't make that a foreseeable goal or task for the future. In other words, let's teach people how to learn Torah correctly, and then all of that will fall into place.
Similar arguments have been made, the Zionist movement in Al Deal. There were people who said, why we shouldn't be focusing on moving Jews out of Europe to Israel immediately, because that's not something in the foreseeable future. It's 1930, and we don't see that even as a possibility. We should be putting out Hebrew literature and Hebrew culture, and then slowly, within a few hundred years, people are going to want to move to Eretz Yisrael, and they're going to have a state. So or the truth is, maybe that argument was right in the 1500s. I don't know, but the reality is that without a Bedin HaGadol, we are a stagnant civilization that is living by certain laws that are very stagnant and they need to be updated, and we don't have the technical, mechanical mechanism to update these laws without a Bedin HaGadol. I'm aware
there aren't too many laws that need to be updated. Even regarding the Agunot, there's rabbis who already destroyed the whole notion, for sure, in Yeshiva universities.
It's not just laws, but it's not just laws, my friend. It's also clarity. Women who consider themselves religious, some are covering their hair with other women's hair, others with hats, others with some sort of snood, and everybody thinks the other one is doing the wrong thing. No one knows who to turn to. There's just so many rabbis saying different things, including some like myself who think women don't really need to cover the hair. That's a different position. Like, if you had a Bedin HaGadol, that argument...
Like the Rav Mashash position.
I kind of take it. Like, here's the thing. That's a subject that the Bedin can vote on it, decide on it, and end this silly conversation. There's so many other conversations like that need to be had. In Jewish law, and there's things that need to be updated. Rebbeat, how do we treat Rebbeat as a heter iska with it? How do we practice Rebbeat this generation? These are things that business law, I've had business disputes where I went with people to Bedin and the rabbis couldn't handle it because the law that we have isn't updated to deal with real estate transactions, with all of the different details, companies that are falling apart, that are buying out other companies, LLCs, so on. So they end up just saying, let's make a pshara.
But are you willing to admit that the reestablishment of the Beit Din HaGadol and Smicha is only based off the Rambam's opinion and not actual halakha?
I'm not embarrassed to use the term Maimonidean. I accept that Maimonides I believe that Maimonides had the right understanding of how the halakha works, and that we could reestablish the Beit Din HaGadol. Yes, we will not.
He clearly says that it seems to me, both in his Parsha Mishnayot and Mishneh Torah, regarding reestablishing the Beit Din HaGadol, I don't know why people just ran with that, and actually tried to do it. I mean, mind you, if they reestablish the Sanhedrin and they start putting people to death based on opinion, now I hope that we find some source,
I don't think we need to be putting people to death so fast. I don't think the Bedin Hagadol, even in the time of the Mishnah, was engaged that much in that. I don't even know if the Romans allowed.
I don't even believe in it.
Yeah.
I believe they were. I mean, it's just a midrash that teaches that if they killed one in 60 years, it was a bloody baked in. I mean, honestly, thank you. But you're telling me that there weren't any murderers or victims' families in Eretz Yisrael at that time? And justice wasn't meted out?
I don't think that the Bedin dealt with that. I think the Romans and the Judean kings had their own way of dealing with that. I don't think the Bedin.
Oh, well, that's another.
Yeah,
that's another way to look at it.
Separation of powers. But again, look, I think that that Maimonides was correct, not just that near our laws, also near our lanu, but I also think the nation, our civilization, need that mechanism because that's what made us who we are. That's what I think. Now,
all right, next topic.
I agree with you.
What else?
So the other issue is, so this topic, it's a bit complex. I don't know how to fit this into like a phone conversation that's recorded, but we'll do my best because, your position on conversion. Okay, I'm going to admit that I've listened to your position and I've been kind of changed by it in many ways. I can maybe rethink my position on many, many things in halakha and in how the Jewish world works. And I owe you.
Can you briefly explain my position, just so I can know that you understand it clearly?
So your position, as much as I understand, is that I'll start with stuff I agree with. That converts should be given the treatment like the Mishneh Torah mentions, right? I can't be against that, which is explaining to them monotheism, as we discussed, explaining to them the concept of Ol Malchut Shamayim in several mitzvot, and basically converting them as easily as that. The conversion should be easy. Right? You also believe that...
So it's not just Mishneh Torah. He's quoting Chazal and the Shulchan Aruch quotes the Rambam verbatim. Okay? Just to be clear, right?
Yes. Yeah, so it's also Shulchan Aruch's position, but I kind of, I give weight to it more. So you also claim that, you also argue that we should be open to everyone, and then you I've heard you say that we should be proselytizing and convincing other people to join Judaism, and I've seen that in your public websites and videos, bejewish.org or something, and because since this is the truth, and this is God, and this is Torah, and this is Emet, we shouldn't be racist and only sharing it with our own racial group, but
that's what I believe,
sharing it with the whole world because it's so great. All right?
Mamash.
Yeah, then the third point that you actually once told me in a Facebook conversation, I don't know if you remember, was you even said, we should be an ummah, like the Muslims, in the sense of...
No. Right, so we should be a nation like the Islamic ummah. In other words, a nation united by belief, but yes. Yeah,
united by faith and not by blood. And
correct.
That conversation really got me thinking. I'm like, wait a minute. Look at the state of Israel. Look how the Jewish people self-identify. Is Asher correct? There's a source of Chazal, and I thought about it a lot. Okay, now this is how I see your position. Okay, and here's where I disagree. Okay, I agree that the actual requirements for conversion are not as severe as the conversion process is made out by various Orthodox rabbis. Okay, I agree with that. I also agree that al pi halakha, 3 hediotot can do a conversion in a day or two, and they can just end it and convert people, and the person will be Jewish al pi halakha. I agree with that as well. Okay.
Just for my listeners, hold on. I'm just going to have to translate what you're saying as you go along. So 3 hediotot is 3 laymen. In other words, according to halakha, you don't need to be a rabbi to convert anyone. Just to make that clear. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, you can remind me if I use Hebrew terminology, yeah? So that I need to be translated. So look, that I agree with, but here's where I disagree. I think that, I disagree with this on several levels. On the first level, I think we should be rejecting converts at first for the following two reasons. Actually, 3 reasons, 3 points. One is, you have to think about the person that wants to enter our great dysfunctional family. Judaism today is dysfunctional on many levels. The Jewish nation is not functional on many, many levels. So when a person, I know many converts, and you know as well, and some of them we both know, they make this choice out of the nobility and out of fearing God, and they believe that they're doing the right thing. But then the Jewish world, in its present dysfunctionality, and I don't say this happily, breaks them down emotionally, spiritually, financially. It abuses them, depletes them of their resources for no reason, confuses them, and leaves them broken remnants of the people they once were. I have friends who were well respected, made good money, had nice families before they converted, and turned out to be, their confidence was completely crashed once they converted. So if you're a rabbi or just a person who's a layman and looks at a prospective convert, you have to understand your responsibility that yes, what we have is true, objectively, but are you doing the person a favor by letting them in? That's a responsibility that many people don't.
Can I respond to this?
You can.
Are you against the Kiruv movement?
Yes.
So you're consistent. Just making sure. So the Kiruv movement is the modern day outreach movement by Jews for unaffiliated Jews to make them more religious. And my point was going to be, because the vast majority of people who are against proselytizing non-Jews are not against proselytizing secular Jews, who, according to Jewish law, would also not be liable for breaking these laws that they don't know exist.
If you want, I can argue their position as well. Because
first, I was just testing your consistency. Okay, so you're consistent.
Yeah, so I'm consistent. I'm against Kiruv. I'm against proselytization. I am for education. I am for having the information available, and I'm for interested people being educated, whether they're Jews or non-Jews. So if a non-Jew comes to me and is interested in Judaism and wants to know, I'll be as polite and as respectful as I will be to a Jew. And the option of him converting is there, but I would be brutally honest with him about what his prospects are for a happy life after conversion. Okay? That's one point. The second point is, and this ties into like your whole concept. This is why I severely disagree with you. Okay? I believe, I'm going to bring you some circumstantial biblical evidence that I think that one of the unique things about our civilization is the fact that we did not engage in wholesale proselytization ever, besides for a short time during the Hasmonean period, but it was the secular Hasmonean kings that did it in order to subjugate.
I mean, I have a lot more proof that teaches the contrary. I mean,
okay, we'll get to the sources.
And I'm not even using Josephus in the New Testament itself, but
I'm laying out my argument. I'll lay my argument out and we'll get back to the sources. Okay?
Sure.
My argument is that our civilization had a very mature understanding that yes, we're monotheists and we believe in one God, but it's very immature and even dangerous to assume that there's one God.
This is a strawman argument. You don't have proof for this.
That's good for all of humanity. I'm going to.
You're articulating your own ideas. I've held this position for a very long time, and I know the Talmud does not speak against the idea. There's no historic Jewish document where that ever taught that Jews do not proselytize. I mean, some even teach that Rabbi Akiva himself was put to death for proselytizing. Hadrian, at the same time, outlawed Jewish proselytizing because 10% of the Roman Empire had converted to Judaism. The New Testament mentions it. Roman archives mention it. Now, because of persecution, yes, Jews were not allowed to seek out converts. And it almost stuck like it was part of Jewish law. But it appears nowhere as prohibited, as something they didn't do. Mind you, even the Christian text would speak about Jews proselytizing, just because that's what you do in the ancient world to increase your numbers. The more Jews, the more Israelites, specifically with the more Torah-keeping Israelites, the better. I'm not sure when the Jewish people actually devolved to the position they're in nowadays, that people are dying to leave our religion, and we're going to make it hard for people to come in. Huh?
So I disagree with that. Yes, Christians are involved in proselytization. Yes, they make arguments that we did, and we know that Josephus was involved in proselytizing. And even in Talmud, in the Babylonian Talmud, we do see instances of different Romans converting. You have that. Yes, a very large the religion of Rome was stagnant, and many of them did convert. But I don't think there's no evidence in our text that it was, if there would have been a mass movement to actually engage in proselytization, we would find it in Talmud. We don't. We find evidence of actual people converting, but that's obvious because Rome was still following a very ancient pagan.
There's many midrashim. For example, but in Pesachim Pei Zayin, it says Rabbi Asher teaches that the reason we're in Galut is only to acquire converts. It's clear. The Rambam writes in a famous... Okay, fine. I understand. It also doesn't mean that we're not. But the Rambam clearly writes in a famous Teshuvah that it's mutter to teach Torah to Christians and draw them to our detenu, to our law, to our religion. Now, he does exclude Muslims there because
they don't believe in the text.
Right. Yeah, so some people think also we would have mentioned Muslims, he probably would have been put to death. So the Rambam teaches that it's allowed to do.
No.
All right. So he never said it's our custom not to do it. I mean, mind you, it was converts.
No, I disagree. Teaching Christians Torah was because they hallow what they call the Old Testament, and it's not disrespectful to teach it to them if they ask. It's normal, just being a good guy, being a good person.
The Rambam clearly states to draw them to our religion, i.e., that is what it means to proselytize.
Is this in the Mishneh Torah? I don't remember the
No, it's not in Mishneh Torah. It's the Tshuva of the Rambam. It's the Tshuva of the Rambam. It's in the Buber edition, Tshuva 149. I mean, it's pretty famous.
I missed the Tshuva.
All right, fine.
But
for sure the Rambam didn't hold your position. Mind you, in Sefer Mitzvot, the third mitzvah, the third positive mitzvah, the mitzvah to love Hashem, the Rambam states that the way you love Hashem is by doing what Avram Avinu did in Haram. And all the Meforshim teach that Avram Avinu sought converts. He converted the men and Sarah converted the women.
That's a very weak argument.
I'm not trying to base it on this. I'm just saying that the theme is there. Okay?
No,
and there's nothing against it. There's nothing against it outside of that statement. I never said whether we have an obligation to convert the world.
I'm not saying it's forbidden. What I'm saying is that I'm making a rational argument that it's immature to assume any religion, whether it's Islam, Christian, or Jew, it would be immature for them to assume that their tribal way of administering their relationship with God is something that's designed for the entire planet. That's the height of hubris. The Torah is true, and it's ours, and it's 100% true for us, but it's a different language, it's a different culture, it's a different civilization. If people want to join us, they're welcome to do so. But for us
I disagree.
to think that the entire planet can follow it, I consider it arrogant and short-sighted. And that's my disagreement with you. Because,
now, this is just a philosophical argument, like you said, but I see it from the other way. I think the only reason that Hashem used a bunch of slaves to get his ideology out was to prove that if I could change the lives of slaves, of people who no one thought very high of, I could change the life of anybody if you keep these mitzvot. I mean, it's just a hashkafic disagreement here, okay? I don't see any intrinsic value in Jews or God choosing Abraham because he was just bored and he needed to choose someone. I think God appointed Abraham, he tested him properly to show that there's no favoritism here, but that we all could reach those heights. And I'm not sure why you think God did not expect the whole world to adhere to his standards. He even says that the nations will say, just by the Jews keeping Chukim, what a wise and discerning people, i.e. that we should join them. It's not just that we're here to... I mean, what other conclusion would you come to?
Well, even in Tanakh, right, you have like Naaman, the military leader of the Arameans. He meets Elisha. Elisha tells them, they're in their meeting. He's an enemy of Jewish
I'm
people.
very familiar with the story. It doesn't say that he accepted 7 laws.
Maybe
I think it's only rational to think that he eventually converted to Judaism. And also,
he goes back to Aram. No, he doesn't stay in the kingdom.
I mean, Jethro also converted and he went back to his people.
Let's separate the story. Here's an example of a meeting in the Tanakh between the prophet of Israel and someone who belongs to not only a different nation, but an enemy of the Jewish people. The only thing that the prophet wants from him is to be a monotheist. And he wants him to go back to Aram. He doesn't say to stay in Israel. He doesn't say, oh, you got to become a Jew now. They don't do that.
It doesn't give that specific there. I mean, you're reading into that.
No, that's what the text says. He sends him back to his place. And he goes back and he just brings sacrifices to God instead of sacrificing to their tribal idol. So, as far as promoting monotheism, I agree that that's what we could do, because I think monotheism is the key to ethics and to human, I'm a monotheism fanatic. I think it's the key to human advancement. But, beyond that, the door should be open, discerningly open, should be open though, and we should allow people in, if they want to, and if it's good for them, etc., and we should dissuade them, because ultimately, in today's world, it's very bad.
Let me respond.
Okay. And I'm going to add one more point. No, it's part of this point. I'll also point out that there are times when we have a complete freeze on conversions, like in the time of Shlomo, when we're worried that people are going to want to come to Israel for social benefits of leaving Africa or leaving India. So Chazal even have that argument where they're like, in the time of Shlomo Melech, because life was so good and resources were so available in Eretz Yisrael, we didn't take any convert because we're worried that people are going to abuse it. So that's another thing that shows that we have that. But anyway,
hold on. Okay.
What are your thoughts? Yeah.
All right, so let me respond here. Being you want to start off in Tanakh, let's go back to Torah. I think you would also agree that there are not 2 standards given in Torah, but 1. So for you to try to decipher anything from the books of the writings or even the prophets that's not in the Torah as something that God validates and ordains, makes you a Baal Tosif.
I didn't understand. How am I being a Baal Tosif? How am I being a Baal Tosif?
Because the Torah itself only gives 1 standard for humanity. It doesn't codify.
It gives 1 standard for a small group, a small collection of tribes. And it's a covenant between God and this collection of tribes. The rest of humanity is not involved.
The 5 books of Moses, hold on. The 5 books of Moses only gives 1 standard in how to worship the God of Israel properly. The way you worship the God of Israel properly is by keeping his laws. There's only 1. No. Huh? No. For everybody. There's only 1 standard. With the exception of Nevela to a Ger Toshav, there's only 1 standard, and even Chazal discuss it. Because by mentioning the concept of what is a monotheist in the eyes of the Talmud. Now, there are 2 opinions of what a monotheist is, according to Chazal. Someone who keeps all the commandments, with the exception of Nevela, or someone who's just liable to keep 7 commandments. In other words, not even Chazal had an actual understanding of what an actual monotheist is. So, that means that we have to go back to the Chumash. Because we have a principle of Ein Mikra Yotzei Midei Pashuto, that a whole pasuk, a whole parak in the Chumash cannot depart from the literal interpretation there. And the literal interpretation is that Jews on Mount Sinai really had the status of non-Jews. So if you think that there were also people amongst the Jews in Mount Sinai telling them, why do you want to accept Torah? So when you can live by 7 laws or by some lesser standard, of course not. It would be ridiculous. Everybody knew that it would behoove them, if they wanted to choose life, like it says in Parashat Re'eh, to accept Torah. And by not accepting Torah, they'd be choosing death, which is why the Rambam writes in the Surabia, or that we don't discourage him too much or overburden him too much, lest he turn back to the bad path. I.e., he's saying that remaining a Gentile is the bad path once you've come to the realization that the Torah is true. So it sounds almost a bit racist to think that this high ethical standard, God only really wanted to be embraced by a bunch of nomads. It makes no sense. Jews do not have a monopoly on the Torah.
Asher, you and I cannot speak for God. We can speak for the covenant we have. The covenant we have is Othi Beni Ubenechem. It's a covenant between the God of Israel and this collection of tribes, whether we like it or not. We can philosophize about why that's the case, but a thing can only be what it is. The thing is what it is, and that's what the covenant is. We allow people into the covenant, but to assume that this covenant was...
It's not allow. We don't convert people to Judaism.
Was given to all humanity.
People convert themselves to Judaism. All we do is witness them. And I'm happy that you said converts, because that's exactly what the Rambam says, that the Torah is Israel's inheritance and those who want to convert. Now, that means that it applies just to Gentile as to an ethnic Jew, because it's not really who your mother is, but what you define as Israel, i.e., the Rambam clearly says that someone who's Mechal Shabbat, someone who pretty much spits on top of the mitzvot, is not Israel. Right? It says, well, they're Kagoy, they're equivalent to a Gentile.
I have an analogy.
Sure.
I'd like to present you with my analogy that I thought of, and then it's it would be good for the listeners, and it would also try to put more perspective into what I use.
Yeah, but let me finish my statement, because you covered a few things here. You said that Chazal froze conversion. So the Rambam mentioned this. The Rambam mentions this. Hold on one second.
It's appropriate to freeze conversions at times.
So now you're being a little clearer. But the Rambam writes in the 13th chapter of Asur what that conversions never ceased. It was just the Beit Din Hagadol who decided not to perform conversions, but conversions still happened. It's only a later measure that teaches it in the...
There's exceptions to every rule. Obviously, there's going to be...
All right, so conversions...
So the Melech converted his wives, right? So how could you say conversions didn't happen,
Right, that's the example again. Yeah, but you're setting it like Israel in some way froze conversion. Conversion is the reason that Israel exists. The Birkat Abraham, the promise made to Abraham, was that his descendants would be like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore, that all the families in the world would be blessed through him because of his decision to follow HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's clear. That teaches me that the Almighty would want everyone to reach these heights. And for him to play favorites is ultimately not a God that I would like to follow, and it's not within his character as displayed in the Torah. Now, you could have personal reservations on why you don't want converts to enter Israel, with the whole notion that converts are hard on Israel, that they're like a sapachat. Fine, that's one medrash. There's hundreds more that teach that converts are dearer to the Almighty than born Jews, because the reason born Jews are here is because their great-great-grandparents accepted Torah and Har Sinai, but the non-Jew saw nothing. He didn't see the thunder, the lightning, and he still accepted it. I mean, I would recommend for you to study the letter of the Rambam to Ovadia Hager. It seems if the Rambam's your teacher, whether you're taking a completely different approach than the Rambam. He was so excited. I mean, well, you see the way he talks about secular Jews. Converts pay a bigger price, and what I've seen are a lot more devout than born Jews. And this is the statement of Tosfos, of Amram Mageder, on that statement, that the reason that converts are hard in Israel is because they outdo Israel, because they're so devout. And you know what? It's hard to convert, because you're giving up your friends and your family. If I was going to put my money down on a Baal Tshuva or a convert, I'd put it down on a convert every time.
I'm not putting money down on anyone. I don't look at these things, that way.
Well, you're against both ethnic Jews coming back and converts entering in. How do you perceive growth?
So first of all, it's not two things. I'll just make one more point that I didn't get to make because we got caught up in our debate, and then I'll get back to responding to that. The other point is that I think that considering the fact that the Jewish nation today is so dysfunctional, not just socially, but also religiously and what people call theologically, the fact that I don't think most Orthodox Jews are even monotheists, which basically makes their entire observance, to whatever extent their observance, to be basically null and void, because you're like an Aved Avodah Zarah. So I don't think we're really in a position to take converts. So I'll be even more careful. It's kind of like if you have a family, right, and your family is dysfunctional and you don't have finances to support your children and you're fighting with your wife all day, that's not the time to adopt kids. And converts, you're basically adopting them into our communities. That's another point. I know it sounds...
I completely disagree, and I'll tell you why.
I say this out of love for converts, by the way, and for all the converts I know. I know people who've been driven to suicide because they were perfectly reasonable people before that, and then somebody along the way told them, it's going to be great. The Frum community is going to welcome you with open arms, and you're going to love it here, and it's excellent. So So that's
I don't make those promises, by the way.
Yeah.
I know it's going to be hard for people to convert. No, but to counter your example, before the Churban, before the destruction of the Second Temple, it was converts that saved Judaism. Onkelos, Shammai Italian, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Akiva. Converts saved Judaism back then. Wait, hold on. Converts saved Judaism at a time. No, wait, hold on. They saved them at a time when the Jews were suffering with bigger problems than today. So how are not converts going to help Jews today like they helped them back then?
So, yeah, I agree that we owe converts an enormous debt of gratitude in that period. But yes, Jews were suffering wars and issues, but the civilization of the Jews, we were writing the Mishnah. We had a Bedin Hagadol. We were writing Midrashim. We had Bet HaMikdash. We were in a position where it was reasonable, as a family, we can accept people. We had communities that were functional communities. I don't see very many functional communities. And I don't think we're in a position right now it would be irresponsible of us to adopt people. And you don't need to keep on praising converts because I'm not putting them down and I'm not against converts. I love them. It's just that...
No, I'm giving examples of how they behaved in history and how they helped the Jewish community.
Yes,
and also, only because Jews are dysfunctional, Jews don't have a monopoly on Torah. The Torah does not belong to the Jews. It belongs to whoever wants to adhere to it. In other words, God used the Jews as a vehicle to transmit Torah through them. And in the words of the Rambam, even used Christians and Muslims. So to say that we're going to decide how big the Jewish people are going to grow just because we can't get our act together sounds kind of silly. You know, if anything, we need to wash out the bad blood and bring in new blood.
I don't think it's our job to make Judaism grow, to populate, it's kind of like this Christian idea of Jesus can only come back if the Jews go to Israel, so we have to help them go to Israel. It's not our job to help the prophecies be fulfilled. It's our job to do our obligations, all right? I don't see it as an obligation for us to worry about having great numbers. I think it's our obligation to do the right thing. And
I disagree.
The numbers that we do have to do. We're not.
We could do both.
Contractor.
All right. So you don't believe. You would say that you don't believe that there's anything beneficial in keeping mitzvot, and on a personal level. I mean, does it make your life better?
So that's a complicated question. I observe.
I mean, it's yes or no.
To the extent I can.
Just read Tehillim. All right, so it seems that David HaMelech clearly thought so. The first parak of Tehillim, it says that someone who keeps mitzvot, he's like a tree planted by the rivers of water, this and that. We have to share a planet with some people who do not behave so nicely, who haven't been sensitized by Torah. So you're telling me God does not expect us to sensitize them with Torah? The world is dying and you have the cure, and you think that God wants you to keep that cure for yourself?
I don't think I have the cure for the planet. I don't think I can heal the world. I don't believe I don't believe that I have the key to solve all the world's problems.
So you and I have different perceptions of Torah then.
No, we do.
I converted to Judaism.
We disagree.
Okay. You were born Jewish and I converted to Judaism. I chose Judaism because it works, because it's life-changing. It seems like you carry it around like a burden. And this is the main reason I think Jews don't want to proselytize, because they themselves are not happy being Jewish.
I don't carry it around as a burden, but I can guarantee, you can make the statement that it's totally your choice. Now, I like to think that if I was born a Muslim, I would have chosen Judaism, or born a Christian, but I don't know that the way you know that, because you actually did it. You can't imagine.
Right, if you found out tomorrow that Hacham, your grandmother wasn't Jewish, would you convert to Judaism?
Yeah, for sure I would, because right now I love it and I've been raised this way.
All right, because it's a chut to be a Jew, right? So why isn't it as beneficial for a Gentile to follow the same derech?
Because ma'asim shebechol yom, we see this every day. The Gentiles who convert to our dysfunctional family end up being miserable and unhappy, and then in very large numbers, not all of them, but many of them. So
not enough to even mention.
Sort of like
most converts outlast returning to Judaism, I'll tell you that. They pay a bigger price. See, the thing is, with the average convert,
this is not a reason
won't tell you he's a convert.
again, this is not a reason to not accept them. It's a reason to dissuade them gently. And also to use your wisdom. You see
Yeah, but it's not up to us. That's the thing. We don't convert people to Judaism. All we do is witness their conversion.
No, but we also help them in. We tutor them, we mentor them, we show them the way, we show them the laws, we teach them the language, we teach them the culture. You're kind of ignoring the fact that it's not just a set of dogmas and actions.
All right. So you're going against the measures that says that the reason we're in Galut is to acquire converts. You're saying, forget about acquiring converts.
It's osmosis that brings us converts. We don't need to actively go and bring them in because they come in anyway. Like, if we did less proselytization, the quality of the converts would be very high because we'd only get people who find the truth through great wisdom.
That's not how I proselytize, by the way.
Research.
I encourage people to consider becoming Jewish. I don't go and tell them, convert to Judaism. I educate them with Torah, and the pieces fall where they fall. And it typically means that they convert to Judaism.
I'd like to take a little break from this circular argument and just give you an analogy of how I've come across it. Tell me if you think it's an analogy. It's kind of like, the way I see it, imagine you're going into a club, okay? Like, a music club. And anyone can get into the club, right? But in order to get into the club, you pay a fee, and you get your hand stamped, and they give you a little bracelet, or whatever that is, right? And then you can go in. I consider being born Jewish like just having free access to the club. If you don't enter the club, if you don't accept the yoke of heaven, if you don't keep the commandments, you're not in the club. You're outside the club, you got a free entrance, right? If you're not born Jewish, so you can still go to the club, but you got to pay that fee. You got to get the bracelet. You got to, the usher has to kind of let you in. So that's kind of.
I thought we clarified that conversion takes around 1 or 2 days. It seems like it's as fast, according to halakha, to convert than for a secular Jew to return to Judaism.
Yeah, so it's easy. Yeah, a guy can go into, that's the thing, you can join our club. There is a procedure, an entrance.
The thing is, it's not our club. It's Hashem's club. It's Hashem's covenant. It's not up to us to decide who we want to let in.
It's Hashem's covenant with a nation, and then once you join that nation, you kind of get swallowed into them. So yes,
that nation is the gateway.
Yeah, but you become part of the Jewish nation. We don't have this satellite, we didn't have like a satellite Jewish kingdom in some other place. Rabbi Akiva's ancestors converted. Rabbi Akiva was part of the rebellion to fight against Rome. He was part of the Hebrew nation. So
I've been teaching this for a long time, and I have many sources. I never teach that we have an obligation to go out and encourage people to become Jewish, but just that philosophically is a good idea. And I believe that Jews always did it because there's strength in numbers.
I say philosophically it's a bad idea because regardless of numbers,
it's
a bad idea to assume that you have some sort of...
At least I know where we disagree.
Okay. That's kind of respectful. Also, as much as I respect you and like a lot of things you do and say, I find it a bit dangerous, for the future, because yes, we can have large numbers, but I think that certain things in the world, let me give you an example. Let's say we both live in America. We both have American citizenship, right? So I know you appreciate the Constitution of the United States. Do you not?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, me too. I'm a big fan of the Constitution. I love it, right? Now, if we took this Constitution, right, and we gave it to a country like Nicaragua, they had the same exact Constitution, or we gave it to Liberia, would that change everything?
Yes, it would.
Do people need to be culturally acclimated to these ideas? No, I think that's where I actually looked at Nicaragua's constitution. It's actually beautiful and has the most noble ideas. But the Nicaraguans don't have the civilization and the culture yet to be able to live by those ideals. So it's not just about the book. It's about the people.
But according to what you just said,
civilization, right?
According to what you just said, Jews don't have it either. To the point that they can't even increase their numbers, not even with Baal Teshuvas, according to your opinion.
It's not about numbers. It's about quality. I would rather when I have students come to me study, my monitor is a guide, whatever, I prefer 5 high quality people than hundreds of people that you dumb my class down for. So
well, I'll tell you,
that's just my
you're more likely to convince a convert of your ideology than a born Jew. As a matter of fact, the vast majority of Rambamists in America are converts. This is why
I have quite a few converts in my group as well. But again,
this is the main problem I have with Rabbi Josefa and with David Bar Chaim. They separate the world between Jew and Gentile and not between the decent and the indecent. I think that Judaism is ultimately just a philosophy, and ethnic Jews do not have a monopoly to that philosophy. In other words, the Almighty could start fresh with a bunch of converts tomorrow and send all these unethical Jews to hell, if there's even a hell. But I'm very familiar with your position.
I mean, I agree with Josefa and Rabbi Bar Chaim in this, not because I think that we're genetically superior in any way, but I do think that a lot of attributes of Judaism kind of like develop over time. So you would have a people that read the prophets in its original language for generations are going to just pass down certain values, even if they don't keep the laws. So the value may end up expressing itself in crooked ways, but I think.
But didn't we just discuss about an hour ago that 99.5% of Judaism is lost and needs to find the right way?
No. I said that we've lost the way as far as monotheism and so on. But I do think
so much for that culture that gets passed down genetically.
No, I disagree. I think the fact that so many Jews are atheists, I mean, it sounds counterintuitive, but I kind of see that as a good thing. I'll explain. It's, yes, atheism, I'm not an atheist. I believe I'm a monotheist. But an atheist is someone who rejects falsehood, who rejects false gods, who rejects things that are not proven, who rejects this Platonic thinking.
Wait. I mean, atheist makes himself God. Because they're adamant on the idea that Kathira is worse than Avodah Zarah.
So, there's different positions on that, but I don't see that as, again, I'm not an atheist. I think atheism is good, but I think the fact that our people...
I mean, you really think you have more in common with an atheist and an evangelical?
To a certain degree I do, yeah. And at least in our conception of God, yeah. My God, the God of Maimonides, the God of what I think is the God of Israel, is actually, we have this concept of negation, of apophatic revelation. Our approach to it, because you see, the God of the evangelicals, he has a son, he's very definable, he has the attributes of the Trinity, so we have to reject all these things. The atheist is rejecting all of that. He's closer to the concept, the first cause, the prime mover, the Aristotelian view of God, which... Again,
the atheist makes himself God. He elevates himself God. At least an idolater bows his knee to something. That's the rational approach to this. All right, it's also philosophical.
But this is actually an important argument, because you see, this can go on forever. I know we both have to go to sleep, but you just made a statement that's very telling. You said, well, at least idolatry, he bows to something. The purpose of bowing to God is not to bow to something great. Well, I don't think God cares if you bow to him or not. The purpose
not physically bow, but I mean submit to a higher power. Yeah. That's the thing.
The reason we're supposed...
the atheist makes himself God. I mean, it's clearly an inferior idea.
Let me put this to you this way, okay? I believe that the reason God needs us to submit to him, as it were, was in order for us to be these all-powerful beings that reject everything else. The reason we are to fear God is so that we don't fear humans or governments or any other intermediary being. So if being God-fearing means you're a fearing, submissive person, so then you're not a Hebrew monotheist. That wasn't the purpose of Avraham Avinu. The purpose of Avraham Avinu was to say, no, all these intermediaries, all these religious beliefs, that we can affect the world instead of through natural and powerful means. We can affect it through, pushing the right divine buttons. That is all.
I never mentioned fear and physical bowing, but submitting to a greater authority, which is ultimately what Israel did on Har Sinai.
Submitting to no one. That's what it is. You submit to no one, only God. That means you're not a submissive person. You're anti-submissive.
So I guess humility is not a virtue?
Humility before God is a virtue, but humility before God means that you're the most powerful warrior because you fear nothing else. You don't submit to anyone else. Not to the king, not to the government, not to...
And an atheist makes himself God.
Ideology.
If someone who walks around saying that his heart decides his ethics for him, has elevated himself to the level of God.
So, look, I'm not going to defend atheism because I don't believe in that argument. But I still feel closer to them as a Maimonidean monotheist than to even evangelical.
So we'll agree to this point. We'll agree to disagree. Yeah, we're going to have to do a part 2 to this.
Let's do this. Let's do a part 2, and in the part 2, we'll bring some more sources regarding the converts. I may be convinced that I'm open. Any debate I go into to be convinced by the truth. We could talk a little bit more about atheism.
I mean, this is a topic. It's not ultimately about sources. Our disagreement is more about outlook, how you view the world, and how I view Torah. And I think the Torah is life-changing, and it's beneficial to whatever life it touches. Now, mind you, yes, a convert who becomes Jewish nowadays is going to suffer. But you know what? That's how nations become free. In other words, there has to be a certain amount of people who are made to suffer till we overthrow this evil regime, let's say. But if you don't fight, you're not going to win. That's my approach. So, to be continued.
This is awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm looking forward to listening to this later.